Everybody, how's everybody doing? I'm reading I guess I'm reading it in the chat here, right? I guess if I were giving myself a number, I think I identify with Kelly with the workload and that I have in front of me, and my reaction should somebody get in the way of that workload. But just want to take this opportunity to welcome you to our training. Um, I see a lot of old friends and certainly want to welcome new friends into the conversation. This is our training on serious about safety, majority, and messaging training. How we're going to talk about uh, how we address the issue of safety in our community. But my name is Candia Milton. I'm the Government Affairs Director here at dream.org. Been with the organization for a little bit more than 4 years, actually 4.5 years now. And I tell you, we have a great deal to cover today in a little bit of time. So what I want to do really quickly is take you through our agenda for today and then talk about the purpose of why we're here. And then I'm going to turn it over to Carlo, who is the Serious About Safety Majority Campaign Manager, and he's going to give you a bit of information on the campaign and overview, but then also a call to action. Then we're going to turn it over to Josh, who is our Senior Policy Manager here at dream.org, who's done a great deal of research on the importance of being proactive and strategic in getting our message out. And then I'll turn it over to Brian Tashman, who is with Vera Action. He's a deputy director there, who's done a great deal or had facilitated a great number of conversations throughout the country on messaging that they have polled that have been very effective over the years, particularly in seasons like this in states where we're seeing shall I say, tough on crime messaging and how to combat that. So a great deal of research, and I think you'll benefit from the research that he's had. And then we're going to turn it over to Tori. Many of you are familiar with Tori. She needs no introduction, but she's going to talk about additional opportunities of how we can get the word out. So let's go, Harrison, and talk a little bit about purpose and why we're here in a moment in a time such as this. And I will tell you, Harrison, from my organizing background, we always say the purpose of a meeting is to get someone or the people there to do something they would not have done but for the fact that they attended this meeting. And so that's really what we're here to do, is to get you engaged in this Serious About Safety campaign, however large or small, we want you involved. And so what we want to do is identify leaders who are interested in being storytellers, and Carlo will talk a little bit about that. We want to empower you, the Empathy Network, with the communication tools necessary to have conversations in beauty salons and barbershops and at the dinner table around public safety in a way that is affirmative and proactive. And then we have, as you know, as government affairs director, I can't show up and not recruit you to be a part of our efforts to advocate for what we refer to as an affirmative agenda. As much as we want to fight against bad public policy, as you know, at dream.org, we want to advance common ground legislation. And so we want to engage you in our advocacy efforts. And so those are the three reasons, the three takeaways we want from this meeting. And that's why we called you here together. Again, a meeting is to get you to do something you would not have done but for the fact that you have attended that meeting. And so I want to turn it over to Carlo, who will give you an overview of the Serious About Safety Majority campaign. And then, without a doubt, he's going to have an ask at the end of that presentation. Carlo, it's over to you, my good friend.
Thank you, Candia. Hi, everybody. So excited to see all of these numbers in the chat, and really excited to be here. So yeah, I can give a little background on myself and on the campaign. My name is Carlo Maccarecci. I use he/him pronouns, based in Brooklyn, New York, but from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which I always like to say. I come from a background in organizing campaigns, both on the electoral side. I've worked on for Democratic candidates all across the country, and also in advocacy settings, legislative fights, and other campaigns, mostly in the healthcare sphere, pushing for lowering prescription drug prices, pushing to keep people from getting kicked off of Medicaid during the Republican tax bill last summer. Those kind of projects, and very excited to be on this campaign now. That is a joint venture between Dream.org and Vera, who came together to fund the Serious About Safety Majority, which is the new campaign that we are standing up, essentially to push back on negative policies and messaging. And I'll talk about both of those things at the federal level this year. We know that Trump continues to try to make crime and appearing tough on crime a wedge issue, calling Democrats soft and crazy and out of touch, and making people unsafe during his State of the Union and many times since then. And he's called directly for a new crime bill with a lot of really dangerous policies in there. There's no crime bill right now, but we are building out a campaign that will be prepared to respond both with pressure on Congress if there is a bad crime bill, and also just in the public and with voters ahead of the midterm election in terms of pushing that, telling Democrats and telling voters the choice isn't between tough on crime and soft on crime. The choice is between Republicans and all the terrible things that we've seen happening in cities and with ICE enforcement, and with people on the other side of the aisle who are serious about safety and want to pass proven solutions to actually keep people safe, not just punish people after the fact. So I could talk a little bit about our campaign. There's basically four pillars of the work that we're doing. Legislative, I already kind of talked about that. We're going to have a pressure campaign against legislators in Washington. There's a communication apparatus that we are putting together, both a earned media campaign, meaning putting stories in the paper, getting storytellers out on social media, which I'll talk about in a second, and then also paid communications. So ads, ads on TV, digital ads, those kind of things. Then we're going to create a coalition. We're going to create a coalition of organizers and organizations from across the entire progressive movement who are going to work with us to oppose these the crime bills that could come up. And then the last part is the electoral part, which is how do we make sure that tough on crime messaging does not go unchecked in tough congressional and Senate races this year? And how can we give candidates that are on the right side of this issue the air cover that they need to help tell voters not to fall for Republican messaging, calling out Democrats for being soft on crime? So that's kind of our structure, and we're sort of preparing for three different paths that this could take. This could be the crime bill that Donald Trump keeps talking about, which we think could involve things like going after progressive prosecutors and judges in Democratic cities. It could mean more funding for law enforcement and DHS. It could mean he's very big on ending no cash bail, for example, which is something that I know a lot of people on this call have fought for. He has talked a lot about going after repeat offenders and keeping people behind bars longer. But looking under the hood a little bit, this could also mean individual bills like the Corca bill, which Candia can talk about in greater detail, but is a bill that goes after organized retail theft, but gives a lot of authority to the Department of Homeland Security to enforce some of this shoplifting, organized shoplifting, basically. And there's other bills like that that have bipartisan support that could be advanced as a standalone bill that we would certainly be ready to fight back with our resources. There's also a possibility that we're tracking that a moderate Democratic crime bill package would be put forward, not with any chances of actually turning into law because Democrats don't control Congress, but just to have a message that moderate Democrats can run again, can push back against Republicans and basically say, we're tough on crime too. That would be something that we would oppose, and we would try to find ways to convince those moderate Democrats. Actually, you don't have to try to out tough on crime Republicans. You can talk about being serious about safety and investments that actually keep people safe and keep communities safe before violence or crime even happens in the first place. And then the third scenario is no crime bill. It's possible. There's a lot going on. If you've been in an airport recently, there's a huge fight about TSA going on. There's this war in the Middle East and all kinds of other things that are going to happen on Capitol Hill. And it's possible if the clock just runs out this year on a crime bill. However, we know that Republicans, bill or not, will continue to use crime as a wedge issue in this election and try to point to violence or crime as a reason to not trust Democrats. Well, we will be able to spend money on ads and other tactics to provide a different perspective in tightly contested midterm elections to help candidates who are serious about safety fend off attacks from tough on crime Republicans. So I'll stop there and just go into my ask. If you are interested in this work, which I assume that you are, if you're on this call on a Wednesday afternoon, we really need people's stories. We need everyday people's stories, not just elected officials, not just pundits and experts, but real people who are either doing work in communities to keep communities safe, and people whose lives or whose families have been impacted by the criminal justice system. I mentioned kind of earned media and paid media and coalitions. Everything that we do, whether it's talking to lawmakers or putting ads on the internet or pitching a story to a newspaper, we want to try to center real voices of people impacted, because we know that is a huge part of actually making change. So if you have a story to tell, if you do this work, or you have a personal story to share, please fill out the form in the QR code, and you'll put your contact information, a little bit about your story, and we'll follow up throughout the campaign to bring you on board. And I'll stop there. But if you have any questions after the fact, feel free to get in touch via Tori and anybody else. But really, really hope to have as many of your powerful stories as possible and to include your voices in our campaign. I'll kick it back to Candia or directly to Josh.
Yeah, as we transition over to Josh, let me just say I saw in the chat folks who express interest in sharing their stories. Please do either go to the link or utilize the QR code as a true indication of interest so that we can get in touch with you. I don't know that we're going to grab that information directly out of the chat as confirmation, but if you can go to the link that Tori put in the chat and indicate your interest there. Josh, the ball is in your court, my friend.
Thanks, Candia. I'm Josh Ho. I'm the Senior Policy Manager, as Candia said, at dream.org, and I'm here to talk to you about messaging. You heard about some of the specific stuff that's going to be covered before, but one of the things we wanted to do was talk a little bit more about some kind of modern ideas around messaging in general, which is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. I should probably give you a trigger warning. For some reason, when I put this lecture together, it's become a bit of a rogues gallery, featuring a lot of what I might call villains. But we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but feel free to boo when you see the villains or whatever. Anyway, so let's get to the first slide. One concept I want to really make sure that people understand when you're doing messaging, even when you're sitting in the barbershop or talking to friends, or if you're talking, or if you're doing actual policy work, or if you're whatever kind of messaging you're doing, is the notion of offense versus defense. There's a really important kind of way that you can grab onto something to start thinking about how to construct your messaging. The first thing I want to, so what's defense? Defense, and at least in this framework, is responding in a manner that does not disrupt the opposition's framing. For instance, your opposition says your policy is soft on shoplifters, since that's something Carlo was talking about a second ago. And you respond to that argument by saying, oh no, shoplifting is declining. Now, that response didn't disrupt their framing, and it didn't really say what they were saying was wrong. You could still be soft on shoplifting if shoplifting is declining. So that would be a defensive argument. It's something that doesn't disrupt the framing or say what they're saying is wrong. Now, what's offense? Offense is disrupting their framing in a way that favors your position. So if we were going to go back to the same example, your opposition says that your approach is soft on shoplifters, and you respond by saying your policy approach has drastically reduced shoplifting. So in that instance, you're saying the opposite of what they're saying is true. So that's offense, because you're saying they say we're bad for shoplifting, where actually we prevent shoplifting. The other thing you can do is attack their framing at all. For instance, if you can prove that being soft on shoplifting decreases shoplifting, you could attack the frame. You could say being soft on shoplifting is good. But the idea is when you're on offense, you're saying what they're saying, the opposite of is true, and you're trying to move your argument forward with offense. You could also do both or whatever. Attacking is always better than defending. If you're defending, as they say in the trade, you're losing. Find ways to make your arguments on offense. Next slide. All right. Go one back real quick. Before we go to simplicity, one thing I should say is you cannot accept their framing unless you can be successful on offense in their frame. If we lost, for instance, some people I think actually we're on the right side of the narrative on bail reform, but in certain places we've lost the leading force. And so sometimes, even if we're right that bail reform is better for public safety, people may have already factored into their brains that we're wrong on public safety. So sometimes you have to challenge the frame regardless. One way that I think I've done that in the past on bail reform is to start somewhere else. So for instance, I sometimes try to put people in the position of being at risk from the new policy. For instance, you might say over 40,000 people get arrested in this country every single day, many without committing any crime. If that happens to you, do you want to be considered guilty until proven innocent, or presumed innocent until proven guilty? Things like that. You can put people where they have to make a choice about how they want to be treated. That changes the frame from overall this to something totally different. Okay, now the next slide. This next one is one of the ones you could probably boo. You hopefully remember Hannibal Lecter there. We live in kind of odd times. People want kind of sound bites and hot takes. If any of you listen to sports talk or anything like that, that's all, everyone's trying to get attention and everyone's trying to say something controversial to grab people to them and create engagement. People often don't take time to read beyond the headlines, but they act as if they're fully informed. Like they might act literally just read the headline and think they've read the story. Oddly enough, Dr. Lecter is right here. You should always go back to simplicity in messaging. You should always root your messaging in something that anyone could understand. The art of messaging is finding ways to get your nuance across in compact and attractive packages. Make sure your messages are so simple that anyone would understand their emotional content. Test your messages across your friends and with different levels of sophistication, people who know a lot about policy and people who know nothing about policy. For instance, if you can take something down to just the essence, that's really what you want. One example I could give is whenever I talk about policies that increase regulations on formerly incarcerated people, I say something like manufacturing desperation is a terrible public safety strategy. That's something that everyone can understand. If you put people in stress, that's not good for them and it doesn't make them likely to be more safe. It's simple and it's compact and anyone can understand it. Now, let's talk about some messaging challenges. Far too often we put our messages out, but we don't really think about how putting our messages out will lead to success. In other words, we built a good message, we've got the mousetrap, but we don't know if the mousetrap's going to work. Next slide. So first thing we want to talk about is what I call the first message advantage. And you see, these are companies that were the first to market in what they do. And because of that, they gained a lot more market share than anyone else. And that's true of messaging too. Uh, you know, the first message kind of defines the struggle, sets the agenda, and puts the opposition on defense. So if you're the second, third, or 20th message, you have to understand that you'll have to change the game with your message. How are you going to change the perception of the narrative that the first message created? How are you going to make people pay attention to your argument instead of the one that came first? You have to think about that. That's something you have to consider in terms of your strategy of how you approach messaging. Next slide. Here's our second villain. Size and reach matter. Now, if you look, I put this on here not because I wanted to say anything good about Elon Musk, but because we all face a disadvantage when we're on platforms. For instance, on X, the former Twitter, Elon has made it so that every single one of his tweets are seen by everyone on the platform. In other words, even though I don't follow Elon Musk, I see every message he puts out there in my feed. And he also has 200 million followers, and he also has a lot of bots who retweet all of his stuff. So the odds that I'm going to see a message he puts out are extremely high. Now, the odds that anyone's going to see my reply to Elon Musk is very low. I have about 15,000 followers. So like hundreds of millions of people are going to see his message. Maybe 1,000, 2,000 people are going to see my message at best, unless something crazy happens and I get caught up in the algorithm. The reason I say this is because no matter how good your message is, you also have to think about how you're going to get into the ecosystem where people see your messages. If a great message is uttered in a forest but nobody sees it, did it really exist? It's not really having the message that matters. It's also the size of the message, your ability to be heard across media, and your access to algorithms. You have to have a strategy for being heard across media spaces, in addition to kind of sharing your message. How will it survive with thousands of messages being shared in every minute? Next slide. Don't compromise, but learn from the opposition. Here's another villain, Christopher Rufo, someone who I really, really intensely dislike. But one of the things, if there's anything you know about me, one of the things I really believe in is that you have to learn everything you can from the success of your opposition. And this guy, as much as I dislike him, has created the ability to move policy based on the things that he says by bringing people into his universe. Both Donald Trump and Chris Rufo are kind of masters of framing a political issue on social media and turning it into an event that people engage around. And it's important to learn from people like him. His strategy is basically these things. First of all, rebranding. He tries to make the public associate what he's attacking with what people believe is bad. He tries to give you anecdotes that are shocking. He tries to move more quickly than keep moving the goalposts. Things like that. He's always trying to attack the usual suspects, the Democrats, the whatever. There's always a villain. And he's trying to unify responses. He's trying to create things that everybody, or at least a large part of his base, wants to unify behind. Now, what I'm trying to get at here is what you can learn from this is that we can do the same thing, but hopefully in ethical ways. Making messaging that brings people together is the point. Mr. Rufo might do it in the worst possible way, but communities gather around his messaging. He gets engagement. We can use some of the same tools to create engagement for our messaging. training allies to create viral moments matter. Quick example, several years ago when they didn't have COVID vaccines in Michigan prisons, uh, me and several people in Michigan put together a campaign. It was a social media campaign where we trained 100 people to do a 2-hour event where everybody was amplifying each other's messages. And I did a 1-hour training on how to do that. And we all got together for 2 hours, amplified each other's messages, and it trended nationally on Twitter. And we got a lot of press coverage. And the very next day at the governor's press conference, the press asked the governor about our social media campaign and what she was going to do about it. And the day after that, they put COVID vaccines in Michigan prisons. And I'm not saying it's a cause and effect, but it certainly had some relationship to that chain of events. And so by working together and figuring out how to create community around messaging, not just put message out there, but also thinking about how messaging can become a community event and create engagement, that allowed us to have access to people that we wouldn't normally have access to and to platforms and places we wouldn't necessarily have been on. And that's what you're really trying to do. We need to learn from what these folks do to create larger scale through our messaging. All right, so those are just some basic ideas of kind of things that you should think about when you're kind of talking about messaging and how to take messaging forward. And I'm not sure who I'm supposed to pass it to now, but that's the end of my section. Who's next?
Great.
That's me. Hey, folks. I'm Tori Soriano. If we haven't met yet, Senior Organizing Manager, always connecting you to our work. And so I'm going to ask you to participate in a Menti moment. If you're not familiar with Mentimeter, it's kind of like an interactive tool we use to kind of help, break up the monotony of this meeting, but also get you involved in the conversation. And so you can scan on the QR code to participate, or you can type menti.com and then enter the code and you'll be entered into our little, kind of like a little interactive game. And so all we're asking you to do is, hold on, I'm getting it, getting the link so for folks in the chat. Oh, looks like we already got it. All right. All right, so when you're talking about having a narrative shift, who comes to mind? Who's someone either close to you or someone you've maybe had some deep conversations with that you would love to change their perception of crime? Maybe a good person to practice on, your father. We got some parents. Yeah, the font is kind of hard to read. I'll repeat the question for folks. Who comes to mind when you think of someone close to you whose perception of crime you'd like to help shift? We got my stepsister, cousins, my aunts. I put my family, my husband, parent-in-laws, senators, legislators. Yep, I think we all know a few of those. We have some formerly incarcerated program participants. Yeah, even folks who are in the weeds might have a misunderstanding as well. Teachers, in-laws, bro-in-law, neighbor, elected officials. People don't look at the data. There's a lot of people who don't look at the data. That's a lot. We got friends that have unfortunate opinions. Yes. Jail staff. Yeah. Prison staff. I think we got a few more if you want to scroll down. More of those elected officials. That's why we need everybody to help us with our lobbying. Got to change the minds. Local sheriff, yes. Local law enforcement, definitely. Yeah, and if you can't participate in Menti for any reason, you can drop it in the chat as well. We got some answers in the chat too. People in my neighborhood, my state senator who is progressive, but like myself can always learn more. Yeah, that's mine. That's my senator as well. people in my neighborhood. Media, yeah, media, that's a big one. That's a huge shift that we have to change because I think the overall perception is very tough on crime favored. All right, thank you guys for participating. And if you have any leftover um, points, you can put them in the chat as well. But thank you so much. And I am going to kick it to Brian.
Hey, everybody. First, thank you so much for having me. My name is Brian Tashman. I'm the Deputy Director of Vera Action. We are part of the Vera Institute of Justice. We are the advocacy arm. Vera Institute of Justice has been around for several decades, fighting for criminal justice reform and immigrant rights. Jump to the next slide, please. And what I'm here to talk to you a little bit about today is some of the messaging research that we have been doing over the course of the last few years. As probably most of you know, you can write the best legislation, you can come up with the best policy, you can get the best bill passed into law. But if you don't have the right politics, you don't have the right messaging, it may not go anywhere. Or maybe you get it passed into law, but it comes under attack and you can't defend your win. So at Vera Action, we really work to try to find out how do we get the politics of crime, public safety right. Next slide. So Vera Action has conducted over 40 rounds of research on voter attitudes towards crime, public safety. One thing I will say is, you know your audiences, your constituents best. So please feel free to use these as recommendations and messaging that can help further some of your work, but you don't need to use everything verbatim. Certainly, if there are some things that you think will really work for your audiences, use that. If you think, you know what, that may not work for the people I'm speaking to, then that's okay. These are recommendations, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how we construct our messages and why. But the biggest real takeaway we want to really emphasize is that it's really important to show that you are fighting for change and not simply equivocating or ducking the issue. Next slide, please. So there is some conventional wisdom that anytime, I'm from Long Island, and I just remember reading the New York Post, which, if any of you are familiar, is a very right-wing newspaper. And it was always about just talking about that. Whatever the government is doing is wrong because voters want folks to be tough on crime, and the government couldn't get tough enough. Whatever, even if it was, no matter who was in office, it was always saying, real people just want us to be tough, tough, tough on crime. But what we found in our research is that that's actually not the case. Most people don't favor a tough on crime approach. Next slide. What we found is that actually folks want an approach that's serious about safety. And by that, I mean they want comprehensive solutions to prevent crime and break its cycle. So I'm going to read to you what a serious about safety approach looks like. And this is from our survey this January, where you can see it beat the tough on crime message by 59 to 41 point margin. We should fully fund things that are proven to create safe communities, like good schools, jobs, and affordable housing, and help prevent crime by increasing treatment for mental health and drug addiction, and by getting illegal guns off the street, right? So this is a message that we've been testing over the years and refining it. And what we've really found is, again, people really want you to talk about not just what they don't want, which is crime, but what they do want, which are safe, thriving communities. Next slide, please. This just, again, for folks who are interested, shows you a little bit of the demographic breakdown of how these two messages performed. The serious about safety approach wins with all the racial demographics, 2/3 of independent voters, nearly all Democrats, 3/4 of younger voters. You can see here it doesn't win universally. There are definitely some groups that prefer a tough on crime approach. But I think it does show that conventional wisdom that tough on crime is always good politics. It's always what's right. We often see it in the press from politicians. That's just not the case. Next slide, please. So even when it comes to issues of accountability, probably the phrase some of you may have heard before is if you do the crime, you should do the time. And that's something that has rung true in our politics. A lot of our politicians, certainly media pundits, do think that. So we really were trying to think of what do most people actually want to see? Do they want just that type of punishment for the sake of punishment? Or do they want accountability that is about creating an opportunity for someone to make amends and turn their lives around? And when we put those against each other, you see here by an 8-point difference, people prefer that latter approach of accountability. That means doing things that help prevent crime from happening again in the future. So I'll read to you the message that Vera Action is constructed. And again, you can use it. You can use parts of it. You don't have to use it at all. But it's just to show you that there are forms of accountability that's really important to most folks. That doesn't just have to be if you do the crime, you should do the time. So here's how it goes. To make communities safe, people who break the law must be held accountable. This means seeing the harm they've done, accepting the consequences, learning from mistakes, and changing their behavior. Harsh punishment and long sentences alone lead to more violence. We need to provide people with programs that work to turn their lives around and prevent future crime. And I can say, as someone who's in my current job and in my last job worked with a lot of prosecutors' offices when they introduce diversion programs, often one of the biggest criticisms they get is, well, that means there's no accountability, right? If you're going to use diversion, and something that we've really been able to talk to folks working in those offices is to say you can't just introduce a policy. You need to defend it. You need to champion it. And something that's really key, especially when it comes to diversion and other issues, is to say that accountability shouldn't just mean harsh punishment, but there actually are other ways we can have people, held accountable and give them opportunities to turn their lives around. So next slide, please. This is just a bit of a temperature check on the state of politics right now. And I'll just run through these real fast. Next slide. Just quickly, this shouldn't surprise any of you. Most folks do, by a hair, trust Republicans more than Democrats. But frankly, that neither 17%. What we've seen is across the board, regardless of issues, a lot of folks don't trust really either party. And we've also known that Democrats often don't really even talk about their position on crime. While Trump, I don't know if any of you saw his press conference in Memphis, he's often talking about crime quite frequently. Same in the State of the Union, just really drilling down on crime. Next slide. So we wanted to, one thing that's been in the news, and as Carlo had mentioned, is this crime bill that may be coming down the line in Congress. We haven't seen any text yet, but it's absolutely a strong possibility. And one way that we were really worried that Democrats might respond is saying that they're even tougher on crime than Republicans. And that's something that Democrats often try to do, not just on this issue of public safety, but across the board, just trying to show that actually they're going to be even tougher than Republicans on immigration, right? We saw that certainly in 2024. So we decided to put that to the test. Two universes heard the same Republican message about law and order. And then we compared that to a tough on crime Democrat and a serious about safety Democrat. I read the serious about safety message before, but just really important to look at this breakdown. The tough Democrat actually performs significantly worse against a Republican, while it's serious about safety Democrat beats a Republican, the same Republican, by 6 points. So what does that tell us? It's definitely not politically fruitful to try to be GOP light if you're a Democrat. It is something where voters are actually craving an alternative vision to just who's tough on crime, who's for law and order. Next slide, please. We are now in 1 year and 2 months, I believe, the Trump second term. And something that we've found is that there's actually been a bit of a backlash to the tough on crime policies that people are now seeing in real time. Next slide. So one thing just around, before I get into some of the Trump approaches around policing, I want to just talk to you through a few messages Often this debate gets boiled down to just like who's going to fund police more, who will put more police on the streets. But there's actually some different approaches we can talk about that perform quite well. One is lifting the burden from officers from responding to every single social problem. That is a message that Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York City, has used a lot, both during the campaign and as mayor. Just a few days ago, he was introducing the new Office of Community Safety. And he talked a lot about that officers right now are burdened by taking so many calls, responding to every single problem in the social fabric. And there's actually other folks, other types of responders we can use. Another message that we've probably heard a bit more now after these recent deployments by federal officers in Chicago, Minneapolis, LA, is talking about actually we need law enforcement that builds trust and bonds with communities and not as simply act as an occupying force. And then, of course, there's this message around supporting police when they're doing their jobs, but also making sure we hold them accountable when they use excessive force or abuse their power. President Trump, Vice President Vance recently said, law enforcement has complete immunity. And most folks actually don't agree with that. Most folks do believe in accountability for law enforcement too. And I'll get into that deeper into the deck. Next slide, please. So again, when it comes to these hard things about policing, one way you might want to consider responding if you do come under attack by someone who uses this sort of back the blue language, is to say the following: I'm not about scare tactics or slogans, and I'm not afraid to have an honest conversation. We keep expecting police to solve every social problem, from kids skipping school, mental illness, homelessness, to gun violence. No one profession can do that. We're spending $115 billion a year and putting too much on our police departments. It's time to try out promising new solutions to lift the burden. It's time for support and change, not blame. Again, that is a message that we've been working on and has really been championed by Zohran and a few other folks who ran successfully for mayor. Just mentioning, we are relying, our system right now is designed to rely on police to respond to all these different social problems. It doesn't make any sense. We actually can think about and consider new solutions so it's not just the police as the only folks that people can call. Next slide, please. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but this is just about accountability. I mentioned earlier Trump and Vance talking about law enforcement immunity. This is just a test about do you believe officers should have accountability if they use their power, break the law or not. You can see here 2/3 do believe that officers should be held accountable. They break the law or not. Of course, we'd love for that number to be higher, but still very significant majority. Next slide. The backlash has not just been against Trump, but what he's done, but also the feeling that Trump's actions are making people less safe, right? So Trump is really trying to take on the mantle of owning public safety as an issue, but more and more people are saying that what Trump's doing with his policies and actions is making life less safe. Next slide. So this is just a general question of folks. You can see here, there's still some pretty strong support for these federal deployments. This was in January at the beginning of Operation Metro Surge. I would expect now that 46% of supporting federal deployments might actually be even lower now that we've seen it in Minneapolis. Next slide. But now, after Operation Metro Surge, we asked folks, do you believe the actions there in Minneapolis made people less safe, more safe, no difference? 53% said Trump's Operation Minneapolis made people there less safe. Only 28% said more safe. That means a lot of MAGA Republicans even didn't think it make life safer. So again, this is an issue where the administration is perceived as gone too far. They're now actually making things worse. And it's an opportunity for folks like us to say, we're the ones who are really about making life safer and more just, while the Trump administration is not interested in our safety, and they're actually going to make things more dangerous. Next slide, please. Again, I'm not going to read the entire message here, but one thing I do want to say is that when it does come to immigration, you can despite a lot of the anxieties around that we've seen in the public debate, where a lot of even some Democrats, frankly, have try to show that they're very pro-ICE, voting for resolutions thanking ICE. 6 in 10 voters actually believe that we can stand up and challenge ICE, stand up to ICE and challenge them, call for ICE to stop terrorizing our cities, and for Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform. People have really been disillusioned with ICE as a result of their really obscene, deadly actions. Next slide, please. And then just going to a few other issues here. You just jump to the next slide. So when it comes to issues like homelessness, mental health, there are definitely ways to talk about this without just jumping to a tough on crime, arrest everybody approach. You can see here 2 out of 3 voters agree with this type of message. When people are experiencing a mental health crisis or struggling with addiction, they should be met by a trained mental health professional, not the police, who can connect them to treatment and services. Addressing the root causes of these crises help prevent future crime, disorder, and repeat offenses. So this is a message that we constructed. It doesn't ignore it. It doesn't, say like, oh, these aren't real issues. We don't mention statistics at any point. We just talk about what we think a smart solution would be. And that would be not sending police anytime someone maybe in public is experiencing a mental health crisis, but actually trying to connect them to the treatment and the services they need. Next slide, please. Same when it comes to the overdose crisis. We've certainly heard a lot of language from the right about how certain approaches they would say normalize drug use and dangerous choices. But is that actually what most people believe? We found that tough on crime approach to drug use is actually shared by only 1/3 of voters, while 2/3 prefer an approach that really does say, yes, we should be using funding to save lives, like reversal drugs like Narcan, test strips for first responders. The real key is we want to not just respond, but also prevent overdoses, keep people alive, and give people a chance to get treatment and recover. So you could probably see some general themes from these last rounds of messages that I've read. A big focus on prevention, and also opportunity for people, not simply locking them up. That is what the tough on crime approach has been doing for decades. We know it's not working. It is bad for them. It's bad for all of our communities. Next slide, please. And then this is just a messaging platform that the Vera team has put together. Again, these are some of the policies that our organization has been championing. This might be shared by some of you, might be some things, not others. But I just really wanted to, again, emphasize that when it comes to, a lot of the fear-mongering you might hear, that, the only way that we can really have safe communities is if we just triple our, funding for police, send more officers on the street. There actually are alternative policies that we can get behind to create safety and justice for all of us. It's simply not true that the tough on crime side has a monopoly on ideas and policies to respond to crime and public safety concerns. I think I'm going to be wrapping up soon, but you can just jump to the next slide. I think it's just a few examples of how folks have used it. I don't have time to play this ad, but you could just go to the next slide. I'll read to you. Oh, no, this slide. You don't have to play it, but I will just read to you a really clear message from the new mayor of Detroit, Mayor Sheffield. She starts off by acknowledging, the concern around public safety, right? Detroit had a decline in crime, but she doesn't go around talking about statistics. She talks about what her plans are to do. So she anchors her message with the value of, we know that one life lost is still far too many. And then she shares her vision. I believe in a comprehensive, holistic approach to public safety, rooted in strong partnerships with our law enforcement agencies and communities. I'll ensure as mayor that we are investing in prevention, year-round employment for our young people, ensuring we're expanding our CVI work, and that we're investing in intervention and expanding community policing efforts, boots on the ground in our neighborhoods, and also mental health co-response as well. Next slide. I think you actually just jump one more. Next slide. And then just a few other folks who have, again, championed that type of message, folks who are talking about prevention, safer communities, and justice. Next slide. And I think just for more information, this is the email from our director, Insha Rahman. I can also drop mine in the chat. But really just that we really want to make clear is that a serious about safety approach is one that really anchors those values, safety and justice and accountability, not trying to make us decide. We can either have criminal justice reform or public safety. That's often how it's presented in the press or by some politicians. We know that's not true. We know we can do a lot better. So thanks so much for your time. And I'm going to hand it over to whoever's next.
It's me again. All right. So hopefully you were inspired by so many of our messaging experts to get in the game to help us fight against these talking points and talk about true ways to help with public safety. And so 2 ways to get involved. We've shared this throughout the chat, but if you're interested in helping with the narrative shift, you can share your story with Carlo. You could just use the QR code or we'll put it in the chat. The link that you can sign up and share your story. You can even just put a blurb if you don't think you're a well storyteller. This is what these experts are for, to help you share your story. And we can talk about ways to share them, including your legislators. And so the QR code to your right is about doing some advocacy meetings with your legislators. So joining us in some virtual lobbying to talk to your senators, some committee members to kind of help with the narrative shift as well. And so you can scan the QR code. You can also put your email in the chat if that's easier. If you're like, Tori, you're throwing too many links with me. You can put your email in the chat and I'll contact you for lobbying meetings. And you can share your story by clicking the QR code. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I lied. There's a third option to get involved. So if you're not comfortable sharing your story or talking with legislators yet, then all we ask you is to help spread the word on social media. We have a very handy social media toolkit. If you click this QR code or if you put the link that I'm about to add soon, it'll populate you with a cool way to just share a post very quickly on your preferred social media. And it already has a graphic and everything and a statement that copies and pastes everything. So if you don't have to change a thing, you can if you want to. But we're asking you if you could take a moment right now to scan the QR code, put the link in. Let me put the link in the chat. Just a quick minute and share it on social media right now. Perfect. All right, thank you guys. Thank you for helping us amplify this being serious about safety. And I think while you're posting it on social media at the moment, we can kind of start the Q&A section. And nice, thank you, Harrison. Oh, I forgot. I want to hint that there are more opportunities to come. And so we have these opportunities we've already shared with you, but there are more volunteer opportunities to engage your community directly and to kind of help build upon the power that we're talking about today and to your elected officials. And so please keep we'll be keeping you updated as things go along, especially if you're, keeping up on our email, if you're on our Slack. We'll make sure to keep you guys in the loop as more volunteer opportunities come. But thank you. All right. So if you haven't already, you can add your question to the Q&A section right now, and I will read them off. But our first question is, what if you are posed with an argument of somebody who says, why can't we do both? Why can't we be tough on crime but offer solutions as well?
I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this, but it really is situational. A lot of times you can find data and evidence that suggests that tough on crime solutions actually make the problem worse. And so it wouldn't be a good idea to do both if it made the problem worse. Uh, so, there are, it depends on the situation, which specific issue we're talking about. But I do think that the general framework does embrace responsible, for instance, responsible and accountable law enforcement, but also reform and investment in communities and all the things that we want, like mental health treatment and addiction treatment that doesn't come from the police or from correctional officers. And so I think the whole premise of this approach is that if you're serious about safety, you're not just looking at the traditional solutions, and those solutions, they're already there. We're trying to build something new and more meaningful that has more impact on our communities.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I would only add one thing that we found in a lot of our research is that people want to, just as you said, they want to think about what can we point towards to create safe communities, right? So crime, as we like to say, is what people don't want. We really need to talk about what people do want, which is safety. So certainly, I think also when you go to tough on crime, it raises just a lot of parts from history of what we've seen with tough on crime, like the 94 crime bill. There's just a lot of mixed associations with it that could end up undermining the message itself. But yeah, I definitely agree with what you just said. And I really would recommend you don't have to use whatever exact words, but try to talk more about the solutions that you want to put out there, the vision that you have, rather than trying to get into this whole what is tough on crime and what's soft on crime.
Perfect. I think a lot of people are resonating with that in the chat. So we have a question from Lana, I believe. It says, what do you suggest to study/prepare to deepen understanding/facts for these conversations?
Again, I'll jump in, although other people obviously should answer as well. You know, whenever I work on a topic, whatever bills we're working on, whatever, the very first thing I do is try to understand all the academic and all the research that's been done on it by all credible sources, so that when I start from a position of understanding that research. And I'll tell you, 20 years ago, it would have been much different, but now almost all of it is very easily available on Google. You just have to be able to do good, decent Boolean searches, know what the kind of the words that people use for the kind of policy you're talking about, and you'll usually be able to find the research. Another way you can use Google is there's a thing, if you do a search and just put in the words in quotations, Google Scholar. Google Scholar is kind of the same thing as Google, but for academic research sources. And so I think you can use that too. I think you'll also find as you read articles, conventional articles about the topics that you're covering, you'll find references to research, and they're very easy to find through that. And once you've found one piece of kind of what, if someone says this new study has come out, that study will almost always have a survey of the literature, and it'll have citations for almost all the other studies that have been done in that area. And so over time, and well, in a fairly quick period of time, you can read a lot of research, and it will really help you understand as you're going forward, because when you're going into these, if you're pushing a policy agenda, as you're going into meetings and you're meeting with people and you're meeting with legislators and you're meeting with police and you're meeting with prosecutors, what you're going to need to know is the facts. So it's a good practice to get in if you're working on a campaign to get deep in the actual data on that campaign.
Yeah, thank you everybody for attending, and I'm so grateful to have these smart colleagues. Man, they make me look good every time I ask them to show up. They show up and they show out. So I want to thank Josh, Carlo, and Brian and Tori for the contributions to the conversation as we strengthen our message. I think Linda probably said it best. We need to pivot from using tough on crime to solutions for public safety in our community. I think that was something she echoed in one of our earlier meetings, and it's something we'll take with us beyond this moment. I hope you feel a little more comfortable, if not completely comfortable, pivoting from tough on crime as a solution to our community, but rather real solutions, serious about safety when it comes to finding solutions to the problems we're finding in our communities. Look out for more engagements like this. But again, as I stated in the onset, I hope you feel inspired to do something you would not have done but for the fact that you attended this meeting, and tap into one of or all of the 3 levels of engagement that we've offered as actions to take away today. Again, thank you for your presence, thank you for your attention, and thank you for your participation. We look forward to being in partnership with you going forward as we seek to advance affirmative policy agenda and affirmative messaging. Good night, everybody.